I was about 7 years old playing in the schoolyard when I overheard two mothers standing nearby talking to one another. One said, "Kids with divorced parents are kicked back and forth like a football." Their words got my attention. In the small, rural North Carolina community where I grew up, I never heard anyone talk about divorce. My own parents had been high school sweethearts. They married when they were 18 and had me when they were 19 in their first year of college. When I was a baby, we lived in married student housing on a small college campus. My parents juggled classes, a baby, jobs, friends. Over time, the tensions of married life took their toll. They split up when I was 2 and divorced when I was 3. Other than pictures and home movies, I don't have any memory of them together. That football got my attention, not because I felt kicked back and forth between my parents. Far from it. I felt deeply loved by both my parents. And like any child, I loved them passionately. They were so young and, I thought, so beautiful. They were strong, ambitious, each eventually very successful. After their divorce, my parents went on to start new families. My mom married my first stepfather when I was 4. A couple years later, they had a little boy, my half-brother, though we've always thought of each other as brother and sister. My dad married a woman who already had a little girl, a new stepsister just 7 months younger than me. We had some hard times. It was hard sharing my dad with her, but we became great friends as well. Over the years, my parents each divorced and remarried again. There were new faces, new children, new losses. My parents remained the center for me of two very different worlds. I felt like that football flying through the air, not really sure where I belonged, not feeling connected sometimes to either place. As a child, I wanted so much to be with both of my parents, but to be with one parent always meant not being with the other. As a child of divorce, you're always missing somebody. When I grew up, I wondered, did others feel this way? I was in divinity school at the time, taking classes, wanting to ask the big questions. I wondered, how does divorce shape the inner lives of young people? How does it influence their spiritual journeys, their values and beliefs? Does it make them more religious or less religious? Maybe it has no effect at all. I went looking for answers and discovered, to my surprise, that there was very little research and almost nothing written on the spiritual lives of grown children of divorce. That's how this study got off the ground. That's the story I want to share now. One thing I quickly discovered, everyone learns about their parents' divorce in a different way. Stephanie Hicks remembers that it was her father who first told her that her life was about to change.
It was my dad. I remember we were riding in the car somewhere. I think he was taking me into a ballet lesson or something like that. And he said, you know, what would you think of your mother and I not living together anymore? And I was just like, well, okay.
Catherine Flom never suspected a thing.
And I actually remember one of my friends, her parents were going through a divorce when we were in 3rd grade. And I thought that, you know, was something that I would just never have to worry about. That would never happen because my family, it was almost embarrassing. They were like, leave it to Beaver. That's how I envisioned them when I was younger. My parents did, I think, what you're supposed to do. They had a family meeting. They sat us down. You know, they sat us down in their room. And I just remember staring at their blue bedspread while they were talking to me. I don't even really know what they said. I know they said they were getting separated. But after they said that, I sort of just looked at the bedspread and stared down. And then after they asked if we had any questions, I said no, and I went to my room and I just sat on the floor for a really long time. I told one friend, and then I decided I wasn't going to talk about it anymore. And I didn't for years, and I didn't even really cry either after that for years. It was like I sort of shut down.
For Joanna Haskett, a divorce was expected long before it happened, and her younger sister Christy never knew what it was like to grow up with married parents.
There had been so much conflict and tension for so many years. The word divorce had been something that I think had been thrown around for so long that when it finally happened, it's finally here, it's arrived, as opposed to being something that needed to sit down and conference about, because we had been a part of that discussion for a long time, I think.
I guess I was so young that There was never, I don't think, a time when they told me that's just always the way it was for me, that my parents weren't together anymore.
Ben Wilcox was a minister's son. How could it happen to him?
I think I was sort of in denial about how bad things probably were. And I do think my parents did a good job of not exposing us to a lot of conflict. I do think they handled that fairly well. But you know, I was a pastor's kid, and pastors don't get divorced. I remember being in elementary school, and for some reason that subject came up, and the teachers said something about, and I hope they wouldn't do this now, but it was like, you know, how many here have parents that are divorced, you know? And at the time, in, you know, the mid-'80s, I think it was a little bit lower rate then, but I remember feeling very proud, like, yeah, my parents are together, they're never gonna get a divorce.
Jason Biasi didn't know what was going on.
I do remember going to a courthouse and being in some small room with important people and lots of whispering and having to say something or other and having some sense that this was heavy and foreboding, but not really understanding what was going on.
After conducting a pioneering national survey with Professor Norval Glenn at the University of Texas and meeting with many more young adults in person all around the country, it became clear that even when divorced parents stay involved in their child's life and do not fight with each other, their divorce nevertheless requires the child to grow up traveling between two worlds, taking on a job that formerly belonged to their parents. In a marriage, it's the parents' job first to make sense of their different worlds, their different sets of values and beliefs and ways of living. It's a tough job. When they get divorced, that job does not go away. Instead, it's handed to the child alone. It's the child who grows up traveling between his mother and his father, his first and most important role models for his own emerging moral and spiritual identity. It's the child who must make sense of all the differences that he sees. When he asks the big questions in life, who am I? What is true? Where do I belong? What is right and wrong? Is there a God? He looks to two different worlds that, to the child anyway, can seem as different as night and day. After a divorce, it's no longer the parents' job to rub together the sharp edges of their different worlds. Instead, the rough edges of their worlds rub together in only one place, within the inner life of the child. They feel and even act like little adults.
I thought we should have a family meeting, and so I brought everybody together, even my brother, who was 5, and I made us all come into our living room, and I took out pieces of paper, and I said, everybody write down one thing, pick a family member, and write one thing you like about that family member and one thing you don't like about that family member, because I thought that this would get us to talking about whatever the issue was that my parents had. And my dad wrote, I don't remember what anyone else wrote, I don't even remember what I wrote, but I remember that my dad wrote, he picked my mom, and he wrote that the one thing that he liked about her was her independence, and the one thing that he disliked about her was her independence. And I think, and that memory I've held on to ever since then.
When we would come home from school, my mom wouldn't be home until 6, 7, 8 o'clock at night, so we were kind of on our own, because that's when she would work. She would work all day. And she would leave in the morning before we went to school, so yeah, it was the kind of thing, like, we were making our own lunches, doing our own laundry, making our own breakfast, sometimes making dinner ourselves.
You know, I don't remember having a lot of strict rules because I was sort of my own watchdog. My parents didn't really need to worry about me because I was responsible. I was always the one who was mature, and they didn't have to worry.
A specific situation that I remember was when we had been living in South Korea. My dad was away on a business trip. And in the morning that he was leaving, my mom and dad had gotten into a big fight, and she was drinking a cup of coffee and had thrown the cup of coffee at my dad, and it missed him, and it broke, and I remember seeing it break, and my dad left, and my mom was just so sad that she went right away into her bed and laid there for hours. You know, it felt like she was in there for days. And I just remember wanting to go and be by her side when she was in bed. And, are you okay? Can I bring you anything? Can I call someone? What can I do to help? You know, not wanting her to be sad in bed.
The resilient children of divorce might develop skills that serve them well in adulthood, early independence or sensitivity to others' feelings, but they lose part of their childhood. In our national study, compared to those who grew up with married parents, the grown children of divorce were far less likely to say that they felt emotionally safe as children, and some even felt less physically safe. They more often felt the need to protect their mothers and fathers and to care for younger siblings. Most striking, they were far less likely to say that they went to their mothers or fathers for comfort when they were younger, instead saying that they went to peers, either siblings or friends, or dealt with their problems alone. And the grown children of divorce were 3 times more likely to agree, "I was alone a lot as a child," and 7 times more likely to agree strongly with that feeling. Even the successful grown children of divorce that I talked to recalled struggling with emotions that were at times overwhelming.
You know, I had horrible nightmares when I was a kid. I had a horrible time sleeping. And my memory of it was I had seen like movies like Poltergeist that, you know, when I was a kid came out and were terrifying. And I see them now and they're just brilliantly done. But my memory was of laying awake at night and being afraid that there was something in the room, some kind of ghost, some kind of creature, whatever. And so I would go and try and let my folks let me sleep in their bed. They sent me off to get counseling, and the counselor only wanted to talk about my parents, and I wanted to talk about the ghosts. You know?
I know I had and I still do have very active imagination, and I remember all through my childhood having very vivid nightmares, to where I would get out of bed and go, "Hey Mom, you know, I'm having nightmares," and wake her up, and then, you know, she would kind of help me get back to sleep, you know, pray with me, it'll be fine, and assure me that, you know, it wasn't real. And so I remember that was kind of my biggest worry, like, you know, what am I going, now in retrospect probably, you know, I don't want to go to sleep because I don't know what's going to happen in my dreams, you know.
As a child, again, I was very attached to my mom. I think I was afraid. I couldn't go have sleepovers at friends' houses. I was afraid of that. I didn't even want to have sleepovers with family members when we went on vacation if my mom wasn't there. I was definitely fearful of being without her.
Oh, I worried about everything. That's just kind of how I am. I remember worrying that there would be a fire. That was something I was really afraid of. And I wanted there to be a ladder under my bed so I could crawl out the window just in case, because I was really scared of that.
As children of divorce come of age, many struggle with intense anger as well.
I think it took me a long time to deal with everything. I kind of feel like I put everything on hold until about 6 or 7 years ago, when I really started to let myself be angry about it and sort of grieve.
I was angry at everyone. I was angry at my mom, angry at my dad. It didn't matter. I was angry. I thought my mom should have been stronger. I think she should have walked away earlier. You know, and you say that idealistically, that when something's bad, you should walk away. And we know that there's a lot more that complicates a decision like that. But at the time, I had wished that for her own good and for our good that she would have left that. I was angry at my dad for hurting my mom and hurting us. It really came to a head when I was a teenager. And I, you know, like I said, I think I had my explosion freshman and sophomore year where I really just was all over the place emotionally.
It's now clear that divorce impacts the religious and spiritual lives of children for a lifetime. We found that overall, the grown children of divorce are far less religious than their peers from intact families. Then they're far less likely to be a part of a faith community. They're much less likely to say that they are very or fairly religious or to be a member at a house of worship. They're also less likely to hold a leadership position at a house of worship. Why are the grown children of divorce overall less religious? The reasons are many, but in part it's due to the complications of post-divorce family life. After a divorce, the children are often traveling back and forth between 2 families. It's hard for them to be a full part of any community, much less a faith community.
We stopped going to that church, and I remember like visiting other churches in the area. Never seemed like we really settled into one now. And then when I left home, I didn't go to I wasn't involved in any kind of community of faith at all for a long time.
One of the most striking findings to come out of the study was this. Of those children of divorce who were active in a church at the time of their parents' divorce, 2/3 say that no one from the clergy or congregation reached out to them at that time. The churches too often do not reach out to the children during and after their parents' divorce. They don't want to offend divorced and single parents. They're afraid they'll make the child cry. They don't know what to say, so too often they say and do nothing. Just as importantly, the churches continue to tell the stories of the faith in ways that assume that most children grow up with their own married parents. They don't realize that children of divorce, both young and grown, often hear and reflect on these stories quite differently.
I just tend to honor my mother. I mean, not that I just, don't honor my father and I disobey him, but there was never, I can think of a lot of times when there wasn't a father to honor. So my mother tends to be kind of, her word, even if it's not law, even if I don't take what she's saying as the be all end all, I value it a lot, like what she says and what she thinks and the opinions that she has about my life. Even if we don't agree, I tend to weigh it more heavily than what I do with my dad, because I feel like with my dad, if he ever attempts to talk to me about life, there's so much about me that he doesn't know because he hasn't been around, so it's a lot harder to value his opinion.
To have respect for them and kind of obey them to a certain extent. Yeah, because sometimes, you have to do what you have to do and you don't, obviously when you're younger it's a little bit different, but when you get older it's definitely to have like that respect and for your parents.
Honor thy father and mother. Yeah, it's kind of a tough one because for me, does that mean, I've wondered, does that mean do everything they say? Does that commandment run out at a certain age, for the child? At 18, you don't have to do it anymore? And so it's something I've thought a lot about. And, but that's my first reaction, like, that's tough.
Others say that something as basic as the image of God as a father or parent is foreign or even painful for them.
I don't feel that the higher power is a guiding force. I don't feel that that's pulling me in one direction or another in terms of decisions I make in my life. So in terms of a parent, I don't think that I have felt that way about God.
One of the most memorable images of God being portrayed as a father is found in the parable of the prodigal son. When I talked with young adults all around the country, I found that the children of divorce often had quite different and surprising reactions to this parable. The people who grew up with married parents often say something like this: sure, that parable makes sense to me. I remember when I was growing up and I did something bad, or my brother or sister did something bad. We dropped out of school or did drugs or dated someone really awful. When we finally came to our senses, our parents welcomed us back. They focus on the end of the story, where the disobedient son is welcomed home despite his mistakes. The children of divorce, by contrast, tend to focus on the beginning of the story instead. They recognize that act of a family member leaving home, but for them, it's not the departure of a child that the story reminds them of, but instead the original departure of their father or mother that initiated the divorce in the first place, or the daily comings and goings of their busy divorced parents who were working and dating and always one of them living in another household. For the children of divorce, the story is not so much about the prodigal son, but their prodigal parents. They're like Ben, who wrote this poem about divorced fathers and about his own dad.
I call it the postmodern prodigal. He just had to get out, couldn't take it anymore. He was finally going to see what this big world had in store. Life so far had thrown him nothing but curves. He was set to be out from under and get what he deserved. Responsibility and restrictions, curfews no more. Time to sow a few oats, life so far a bore. Taking only what was his, he walked out the door. He never looked back, never thought all he had left was more. Now, years later, his more meant much less. Could he ever go back, face to face, he must confess that he'd run away from life's best, he'd bought an empty dream. Sometimes the grass isn't as green as it seems. Would they have me back, he wondered aloud. My family I've abandoned, and I've been chasing a cloud. I gave it all up, love, family, and grace. I don't deserve to have my kids see my guilty face. Please, Lord, help me if you can. Make a way for me. I've blown it. I'm the prodigal dad.
Of course, faith communities have much to offer children of divorce. The good news is that many do find a home and a family of faith. Some even become leaders. Ben Wilcox leads ministries to children of divorce and other youth at a large non-denominational church outside Chicago.
Yeah, the organized religion thing to me was not attractive, and I think it took me a long time to really own for myself what I grew up believing, just being indoctrinated into it as a pastor's kid, and that way I really had to do my own spiritual search. I think it really just came to a head when, you know, I found myself drinking a lot to sort of mask and deal with a lot of, you know, the pain that I felt, and that slowly but surely over the course of the years spun out of control. So kind of my re-experiencing God was in the, you know, I need help with this lifestyle that I can't seem to get myself out of. I was just on my own. I was driving home from work. I'd left work because I was too hungover to be there, and just kind of did the old, you know, God, if you're listening, I need help. So I don't know. It's kind of hard to describe. It was a very emotional experience. I felt sort of a release. I felt like there's a big, like almost a physical weight that was lifted off of me. And I've told my wife several times that I just, even very soon after that, felt like I just felt like a different person right away.
Jason Biasi is assistant editor at the magazine Christian Century and is an ordained United Methodist pastor.
When I went to college, the good preaching was going on in the Methodist Church, and I'd been real involved in evangelical outreach groups in high school, Fellowship of Christian Athletes in college, InterVarsity, and I was really zealous about those things in high school. Had a kind of intense desire to reach out to others evangelically, and in college I started to cool on some of that, and at least feel like I at least wanted to ask some hard questions about that kind of practice. And so I found myself still in evangelical groups, but kind of on their left edge.
Today, Jason and his wife, Jaylyn, who will also soon be ordained, are raising their children in a life of faith.
We have a whole lot of religious imagery in our house. That's one major difference from the houses that I grew up in. So we love icons and images of Jesus and crucifixes and things like that. I hope that has some kind of effect, maybe, hopefully not a negative one. We pray with our kids before bed. They like to react against this now because they know it means they're having to go to bed. So my 3.5-year-old will say, "No prayer, I don't want to pray," you know, which makes us feel great, you know, doing our job and all. And then he'll have his stuffed animals pray. So, you know, Pooh will fold his hands and he'll say, "Okay, Pooh will pray, but I won't pray."
Other grown children of divorce are unsure and still seeking. Yet for them, too, the deep questions of spiritual meaning are very much alive.
I go to 2 different churches, one that my mother used to be a member of, and one that my mother attends now, but she's not a member of. And I haven't joined a church yet, and I think it's because while I like both of the churches that I attend, they're both large Black churches, and I really like that idea of just a large Black community coming together to worship. I still haven't found just a place that I feel like really clicks for me.
I became a religion minor and I took a ton of classes. We don't have a major. I would have majored in it. So I decided that before I chose any kind of religion, I wanted to understand all of them. So I took everything from the Abrahamic religions to Eastern religions, in Asia, and religion in contemporary America, and sociology of religion, and Shakespeare and religion, and anything that I could take, I did. I took advantage of that. So for me, school has always been something that is an outlet and something that's comforting. So I decided, since I didn't have the religion in my family, I would seek it in the academic world. And it was almost like studying about religion. What's my religion?
So in terms of the Old Testament and Adam and Eve, I don't believe in that, but I do believe that there's something in the universe pulling everything together. Do you remember the movie Contact with Jodie Foster? She goes, it'd be a whole waste of space if there wasn't anything out there. And that, I really believe that. You think about how everything fits together in such an accurate puzzle, and everything scientifically, and everything just makes sense. There's got to be something that is the mastermind behind that. I don't think that can be chance.
Traditionally, one of the main roles of the churches is guiding the young towards marriage. No one is surprised to hear that grown children of divorce often approach the idea of marriage with a lot of hesitation.
I have conflicting feelings about marriage. I think that ideally it should involve unconditional love and respect and honesty and acceptance. And it's really easy to use throw those big words around, and, or I guess broad words around. But I think it's really hard to define marriage because there isn't one. I mean, every marriage is different.
My mother and my grandmother were both married by the time they were my age, and that is totally not something I'm interested in. I want to be single for at least another 5 years. I think that it's a wonderful partnership, though. When I think of marriage, I think of a true partnership, and I definitely, while it's filled with love, unconditional love and a whole lot of trust, I think it also takes a lot of work, and I think that it's not something that should be entered into lightly. And that's why I think you probably shouldn't do it when you're very young. I think it takes a while to know yourself, even though you're going to change a lot in your life. I think you should get married at a point where you've experienced a lot.
My boyfriend and I say that because we both have divorced parents, in a way, we're better equipped to deal with marriage because we know what not to do.
Marriage as a general concept, I think I'm hesitant about, only because it seems like a very serious thing to apply to all people. And as a society, I think we say that marriage is what you do. You grow up and you get married. And that seems like an awful lot, I think, to ask of everyone. For me, it's something that is very important to me. I want to have that supportive, nurturing partner to rely on and support each other. I think that's a very healthy way of going through life, to have someone that you can talk to. I just think in its idealist form, I think it's something that sounds pretty great.
I was never one of those girls who dreamed about my wedding or was really anxious to get married young and have kids, and I want to hold off on marriage until probably for a while. But honestly, you probably take a gamble and you hope for the best. But I'm probably going to wait a long time before I take that gamble, as opposed to just jumping right into it.
Despite their fears, many grown children of divorce are getting married and forming marriages that last. And today, everyone, no matter their family background, can use good advice on how to form a joyful, healthy marriage. Faith communities can minister to children of divorce, in part by improving their marriage ministries, so that there will be fewer children of divorce in the first place. I believe the churches can be places of wholeness and healing for untold numbers of young people. And the churches that grow will be those that reach out to and minister to the many young people today who grow up in divorced and other non-traditional families. Young people are the future of the church. The spiritual lives of many are now deeply shaped by their parents' divorce.